What is going on, New York Giants fans? Hope you guys had a great Easter and a happy Monday. I am your host, The Giant Topic, joined by Big Blue Corner, CPNY Sports, who we have not had on the channel in a little bit. Glad to have you back on, man, and Aaron Kassman. Now, we are here to talk some New York Giants ball as the NFL draft is quickly approaching. Now, we do have a special guest for you guys, as you guys can see from the title of this video, and we'll let them on the panel in just a few moments, so hang tight. Till then, if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, drop some thoughts in the comments below and in the chat. Would love to hear them. I did go ahead and leave everyone's YouTube and Twitter links in the description box below, so definitely do that when you can. And gentlemen, how's everybody been doing?
Excellent. Ready to get this on and popping.
Absolutely. How about you, Aaron? How about you, Chris?
I'm just waiting for April. Well, I guess I am in April, but the end of April, I guess.
I was about to say we are in April, Aaron. But no, it's great to be on here, man. It's not. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's great to be on here, Chris. It's been a little bit since I've done some Giants content, so great to be back on the panel. Got a whole new setup, new intro. It's fire. I appreciate you. Let's get it.
Absolutely. I appreciate that too. Again, you guys can find their links in the description box below. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring on our special guest today, a man who needs no introduction, a man who's highly thought of in this community, Giants super fan, yours truly, the Entertainah.
What's going on, man?
By, man. Thank you so much for making the time. What's going on?
Yeah, excited to be on, man. In fact, it is April. It is draft month. So really excited about that. Woke up this morning and that was the first thing I thought of. I'm like, wow, we're less than a month away and finding out, what the New York Giants are going to do. And then our fans could stop fighting over what they should do, and then they'll just fight over what they did in the first round. So looking forward to seeing what we do in about 3 weeks, though. Definitely a lot of questions about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of questions, and I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I kind of wish the draft was tomorrow, so, the speculations, the rumors, and everything can just be put to bed, and we can see what this fan base is going to react to next. But always a great time, man. And again, appreciate you guys stopping by. We have quite a bit to talk about today with the New York Giants as the draft, again, is approaching us in the next coming weeks. Now, fellas, right? We all know at this point in time, right, the consensus is either going to be wide receiver, it's either going to be corner. And at this point, I mean, what else is there really to say? I mean, if we're being honest here, I feel that these are two of our, if not biggest needs right now as a team. And as a Giants fan, I don't know how you can't be excited about this, because you're either getting a blue chip wide receiver or you're possibly getting a very good quarterback on the low for the next 5 years that Brian Daboll gets to personally groom. So I feel, it's really a win-win situation. Now, Tana, you are new to this panel. Thankfully, you didn't have to be here when I was banging on my chest, wanting the Giants to trade up for Caleb Williams.
That's not happening.
It's not happening.
I knew that was never going to happen, but I would have happened.
I really believed it would, and I know I was a little delusional, but for me personally, I want to see this team win. I know that the other fans that, you might be a Jones truther or whichever, I know you want to see this team win. So at the end of the day, I'm going to respect everyone's opinions. But Tana, let's start with you here, right? Because you are new to the panel. How are you feeling about pick 6? Is there a player in mind that you like? Are you leaning more towards wide receiver or quarterback? No. How are you feeling about pick 6 for the New York Giants?
Yeah, I mean, I'm at peace with whatever decision the New York Giants make. I think what they did in free agency set them up to do exactly what you said. I knew that they were going to address the edge rusher. I didn't know it would be a trade, but I knew we were going to sign a high price edge rusher because of Bowen. You need a good defensive line. So I knew that was going to happen. Kayvon needed help on the other side, and it sets you up to draft for the strength in this draft, which is exactly what you said. Wide receiver or quarterback, where we're picking in the top 6. I think you can't go wrong with Malik Neighbors. You can't go wrong with Marvin Harrison Jr. And as a Giants fan, I love where we're at, because the way that I look at it is we're either going to trade up for a quarterback, because I don't think we're staying at 6 and taking a quarterback. We're either going to trade up for a quarterback, and then I'm going to say as a fan, okay, Joe Schoen believes in this guy. Brian Daboll feels he could mold this guy into be the next top 5, 6, 7 quarterback in the league. Otherwise, why are you trading up? So I'll be excited about that. Obviously, Daboll's got some credentials in building up quarterbacks. Or B, you sit exactly where you are at pick 6. You let the Vikings trade up, which they clearly want to do, and you end up with a player you have no business getting in the first place, which is either Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., if that were to happen. I think they're the second and third best players in this draft after Caleb Williams, and if you could end up with either one of them at 6, every Giants fan should be thrilled. I know Giants fans want to take a quarterback no matter what, or some Giants fans do, and I get that. But as Joe Schoen has said several times, don't shop hungry. And as a general manager, I don't want him to shop hungry. If you love a quarterback, go up and get him. Put your stamp of approval on it. Go up, give up those 2 second-round picks, whatever it takes. Go up and get your guy. But if not, you don't force a quarterback pick. So that's where I stand. I'm going to be happy either way because I'm going to convince myself, okay, this is a quarterback they truly love, or we ended up getting a player that we had no business getting in the first place. So I think the Giants sit in the driver's seat because if they want to trade up, they can offer more than anybody else. And a lot of people look at Minnesota and they'll say, well, they got 11 and 23. But the 6th pick in this draft, for all the reasons that I just talked about, carries so much value. Because if you're Arizona, you clearly need a number 1 wide receiver. You could still guarantee yourself Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. if you trade back to 6. If you trade back to 11, you're not sniffing those guys. So if I'm Arizona, I'm not even contemplating, unless I'm getting an additional first on top of that, trading all the way back to 11. That's not happening. If Minnesota wants to get up to 4, you got to trade up with the Giants first, and then you got to move up because I got to guarantee I get one of those 2 players. So I think the Giants have by far the most to offer in a trade scenario. Or B, you just stand pat and you get an incredible wide receiver. Like either one of these 2 wide receivers that I just talked about would be the number 1 wide receiver in almost any draft class over the last 10 years. So I think the Giants are in a great spot no matter what they do, to be honest with you. Like, even if they took Joe Alt, which I don't want, I wouldn't even scream about that. Like, there's so many good options for the Giants in this draft.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you really hit the nail on the head. And I'm in the same boat with you with Joe Alt. While I don't want the New York Giants to select an offensive tackle in the first round, because I do believe that they've put quite a bit of capital into the offensive line, it's still, at least at this very moment, because we have not seen these players take a snap on the field together, it's still unproven. It's still unproven. So if you can boost a position that has been a dire need for the last decade and get a guy like Joe Alt, believe me, as much as I want a quarterback, I wouldn't complain at all because I know the value of what we're getting and potentially the player that we're getting at that position. And I don't think any Giants fans would complain about addressing the offensive line because it's been abysmal. I always think about that Seattle game last year. What was it, 9 or 11 sacks against the Seattle defense?
85 sacks last year. 85 sacks.
Ridiculous.
Insane.
Ridiculous. No, and you're right. Some of these receivers would be the number 1 consensus wide receiver in a lot of drafts, whether that's Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze. I mean, I see a lot of people really buying into the Ladd McConkey stock, which rightfully so. So yeah, I'm definitely there with you. CP, we haven't had you on the channel in a little bit. Same thing here. How are you feeling about 6? How are you feeling about the Giants going, whether that's wide receiver, whether that's quarterback? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with everything that Entertainah said. Like, if these guys want to go and get their quarterback, the Giants have all the power in the world. Now, like I said, I know you've been a big proponent of going out there and getting Caleb Williams, and think that that's as bleak as ever, to be honest with you. And I think that a quarterback would come at that 6th spot if there were to be one for the New York Giants in this draft. But I'm fully in the realm of thinking that I know that everyone's saying smokescreen, 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 but this JJ McCarthy hype, whether it's real or not, I don't know. This could be a realistic possibility that we're sitting there and looking at a JJ McCarthy selection at number 6. Now, what I will say, would I like that to happen? No, absolutely not. I think I'd rather go the wide receiver route at that point. names that we just mentioned right now, right? Marvin Harrison. I don't think he sneaks by the Cardinals. I think that if they stay pat at 4, that's who they're taking. And then we just got to hope and pray that the Chargers are not going after Neighbors right thereafter. I know we talked about Rome Odunze on both of our channels live streams ago. I would say like going on a month ago. Like you said, it's been so long since I've been here, but there's a lot of options for the New York Giants here. And I truly don't think that they're handcuffed like a lot of people have been saying. Like, they can go any sort of direction that they want. And that's where I think a lot of Giants fans are, I guess, panicking a little bit. And I guess that it's a valid concern. It's a valid panic. But at the end of the day, I do trust Joe Schoen to make the right decision. I know that we're going to be talking about the regime here going into year 3 and all that good stuff. We'll save that sort of discourse for the upcoming conversation. But yeah, I trust him to make the right decision. And even if that means Joe Alt, you can never get too much offensive line help. I think Rodney always stresses that and always preaches that as well. So I like where the Giants sit right now. If I had to guess, I really don't think it's a smokescreen. I really do think the Giants are caught a little bit between a rock and a hard place in terms of maybe not necessarily needing to reach for a quarterback that early, right, in this draft, but also realizing that there's some serious considerations needed to be made in terms of how much Daniel Jones plays this year, right? Mm-hmm. For whatever reason that may be, whether it's health-wise, whether it's performance-wise, etc. So I'm very curious to see what's going to come in this draft because it's going to reveal a lot to us, obviously, by default. This is a very obvious statement about their confidence level in Daniel Jones. And by default, their confidence level in that contract that they gave out to him. So, which is direct reflection of this regime. So like I said, fully trusting this regime, but this is basically the year, right? If we transition after we get everyone's thoughts to transition into year 3, Daboll and Schoen, this is their salvation right here. This draft is going to speak volumes about their tenure in New York here for the New York Giants. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit it on the nail on the head there too. Now, my only thing is, right, because I think when you take into consideration the injury history of Daniel Jones, and you take a look at that guarantee that he could be owed, I don't. Is it in the best interest for the Giants to even have him play at all? If we're being honest here, I think that's something that I think a lot of fans are kind of curious on because you have some fans I've seen really batting the table from Michael Penix Jr., who, I mean, we could talk about in a little bit. I like the guy, but I mean, you're coming off of a quarterback who's already injury prone. I know it's been 2 healthy years, but do you want to take that risk? Then JJ McCarthy, I know that there's some people that are very high on JJ, can understand it, but at 6, at 3, possibly, there's been some rumors of the Patriots. I just don't see it. I mean, unless it's Drake May for me personally, I'm not trading up to 4 or 3. That's just me. I mean, I really like Drake May. JJ, I've said it on the last stream that we did with Rodney and Aaron. I think he would do great with Minnesota. I think really at that 11 spot, which I don't think he falls that far.
No.
I think that would be a good fit for them. And if Minnesota wants to trade up, by all means, do what you need to do. Go get your guy. If the Giants were in Minnesota's position, sitting at 11 and having 23, I'd be more open to it. But at the 6th overall pick, where if Minnesota does trade up and takes JJ, and let's say the Patriots take Drake May, you could potentially land with either a Malik Neighbors or a Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think most people wouldn't even think that the Giants had a shot of getting. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is without a doubt my favorite wide receiver in this draft. Honestly, it's ridiculous even thinking how the Giants could potentially land a blue collar wide receiver like that. Aaron, Big Blue, what are you guys' thoughts on that position? I know we've spoken on this before, but for the people that haven't seen this channel, what are you guys' thoughts on that pick?
I'll let you go first, Rodney.
Well, first and foremost, to Chris's dreams of Caleb Williams.
Oh, we're down the toilet again. I see. We're in the toilet again. I hear you, man. I hear you. I wanted it to happen. It's not happening. I've lived.
It's not happening.
I've lived.
It's not happening. All right. As far as the number 6 pick, here's my thoughts on that. In my opinion, I think there's going to be 3 quarterbacks going in the first 3. Yeah. Now, what Caleb Williams, whether it's Daniels or Drake May, I honestly feel there's going to be 3 going right off the bat. Now, as far as everything else is concerned, we're in a good position. To be perfectly honest, we're in a very good position. You have Arizona possibly going wide receiver. San Diego, they can go wide receiver. They also need offensive line help. Who knows what those 2 teams will do? But let's say Arizona goes Marvin Harrison. You got 3 other needy teams that needs a quarterback besides Minnesota. Well, including Minnesota. You got Las Vegas and you got Denver. And any of those 3 teams could literally leapfrog and give San Diego and or Arizona whatever they want just to secure their quarterback. If none of those teams do it, or maybe Arizona does, Denver does or Las Vegas, well, guess what? We're number 6. I pray Minnesota comes knocking because I want those 2 picks and whatever else they can give us. We're in a prime position to stay put, get a wide receiver, stay put, possibly trade back, acquire more draft capital, and help fix this team. That's more important to me than reaching for a quarterback. I'm sorry, I don't see us trading up because I just don't see us having the draft capital to do that. And I honestly don't think Joe Schoen is going to literally dip into future picks to reach for a quarterback. I don't think he's going to do that at all. As Entertainah said, Shane, don't shop hungry. Excuse me. And I don't want them to shop hungry, just like Entertainah. I don't want them to do it. It makes no sense. You have the opportunity to fix this team in the right way. If you see your quarterback, if he lands there, or you feel that you can, trade back and possibly gain more picks and acquire a quarterback at that point, as long as that quarterback fits your system, as long as you trust Daboll to get that quarterback to where he needs to be, then that's the beginnings of this team being fixed and done the right way. But I wouldn't even be mad with Joe Alt. I've stressed to you guys how important I feel building from the inside out. That's how you build a football team.
I'm with you on that.
Fix the trenches. We've been screaming. I remember when I first met Chris, Hit Squad, and it was the 2021 season, 2022. 2020 or 2021 season. And we had a turnstile at a right tackle by the name of Nate Solder. And I heard so many fans crying about fix the O-line, fix the O-line, fix the O-line. You can't get away from that. Now, you may not like Daniel Jones, and that's fine. That's your opinion. You're free to have it. But let's just be honest. Outside of 2022, when that was the first year the New York Giants was under Daboll with the scheme, can we honestly say that we had really good O-line play? When was the last time we had it?
2010?
Yep.
There you go.
2009, 2010. Yep.
Yeah.
Over a decade.
Let's address. It's not necessarily, it's a need, yes, and you shouldn't even reach. But in this sense, again, they picked Joe Alt, I wouldn't be upset. I would be I think I would have to really think about why they want to overdraft Evan Neal. But based off of what I've seen from Evan Neal, the writing might be on the wall for him. And he might be the one getting pushed inside. And let's see what happens at that point. But you guys know how I feel. I don't want to trade up. I don't want to reach for a quarterback. Let's just see whatever needy teams are there that want to trade up, get some extra draft capital, and build this team right.
Yeah, I think that they're going to go with Dunze because we don't really have a wide receiver one, and he's 6'4", so that's an easily good target for whoever's playing quarterback. I think Drew Lock's going to start the season. I don't think they're going to start Daniel Jones because I believe if he plays and gets hurt, don't the Giants owe him $25 million or something like that? An injury,
Yeah.
like an injury.
Yeah, I don't know the exact specifics of it. I think I talked to Patricia Traina about it. I think she said it works out to be like an extra 12 million against the cap if it's like season ending next year. But
Yeah.
the way I look at it, I think Jones is going to play personally.
Oh.
If he's healthy, because I think what Shane would do, like let's say he gets hurt, let's say Jones gets hurt, what he would do is it would be a post June 1st cut, and they would just split it evenly between 2025 and 2026. That's just what I think would happen, and say it would be like 17 each year rather than 22 and 2025 or whatever it is. So that and the cap will be like 350 by the time 2026 hits. So that's what I think is going to happen. I actually expect Jones to play this year. I don't know if he's going to start the year. Drew Lock might, or a rookie. If they don't draft the first round quarterback, if they draft the first round quarterback, then different discussion. But
absolutely,
that's what I think they're going to end up doing. I do think Jones is going to play.
Yeah, I mean, and I could see it. I guess it was just more of, is that the right thing to do? Because we've seen him have these season-ending injuries, especially with the neck 2 times. I mean, God forbid something happens. I mean, because a lot of times I try to think more outside of the game. I mean, this is a human being at the end of the day. And, I don't play around with the neck. That's very serious. I mean, you look at the Andrew Luck situation and what could have been if he could have stayed healthy. And while they're not the same quarterback, I mean, right now, that's a question that the Giants have to really ask themselves. Is it worth taking that risk? Now, they might not be able to really do anything if all of these quarterbacks are taken before they're able to get to 6. Now, I do agree earlier with, I think this 6th pick is more valuable than Minnesota's 2, if I'm being honest, just because if you are Arizona, if you do trade out of that, you can still land a high-end wide receiver, whether that's Odunze, whether that's Malik Neighbors, whether that's Harrison. You're still in a very good position as opposed to at 11. I mean, at that point, you're probably either going to have to trade back up into the earlier portion of the draft, or you could stand pat there and, go for, best player available with those 2 picks. Now, me personally, I mean, if Jones is going to be on the field, I mean, am I going to throw a fit? Nope. I'm not, I'm not personally. I'm not one of these people. While I am done with him, I'm not gonna, sit here and act like, we didn't go to the playoffs with him just 2 seasons ago. And it'd be nice to see, another wide receiver come into this rotation, that can be an X factor. Because if Darren Waller, who we're still waiting on our hands to see whether or not he's going to play this season or he's going to retire, the Giants, I don't think their wide receiver room is lacking. I think there's some talent there, but they're lacking that X factor player. So if you can get a guy like Malik Neighbors, who, in my honest opinion, I mean, when you watch him play, how could you not be excited as a Giants fan knowing we could potentially land a guy that? When was the last time we had a guy that could take a slant 70 yards to the house?
Odell Beckham.
Exactly.
Yeah, I talked about him last episode.
Exactly. Or you get a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. who can do it all, and you weren't even projected to get to him. I mean, a lot of people had him as that first pick or a top 3 pick, and if he falls into your lap at 6, I don't think there's going to be any Giants fans, or hopefully, that aren't going to that would complain about that selection because of the player that you're getting. So I definitely understand where you guys are coming from. I still want a quarterback, but I will not be upset whatsoever if they get one of these guys. Odunze has actually been really growing on me. I wasn't too high on him. I liked him, but me personally, I don't know if Daboll and Grow want these guys that are 50-50 ball catchers. I'm just not sure. And I know some people will say, well, he can be the Kenny Golladay that we thought that Kenny Golladay was going to be. I got to be honest. I don't think Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll would have brought Kenny Golladay in if they were there during the time. Yeah. I just don't. I don't know if they would bring him in. I'm not too sure. But Odunze, I mean, he's nice. He's a very nice wide receiver. You saw what he was able to do over there at Washington, and he had himself a hell of a year. I mean, you look at his career; he's had a pretty solid career. Same with Malik. So definitely excited there. I do want to get to some of these chats because I see that we have quite a bit of people here. I appreciate everybody stopping by. First up here, Chris Khaled says, "Do you guys like Spencer Rattler?"
That's Davis Webb, but that's South Carolina.
Yeah. For me personally, now I definitely want to get your guys' thoughts. Maybe in the later rounds, if the Giants aren't able to get their guy within the first 3 rounds, but me personally, there's some upside with Spencer Rattler, but I'm not too high on the guy. Just for me personally, I'm okay. At that point, I'd rather look to a guy like Joe Milton, who we could get to a little bit later. But I'm off the Spencer Rattler train.
Yeah. I'd be fine with Spencer Rattler at pick 70, I guess. I wouldn't want him at 47. I think Giants fans have been hyping him up a little too much from what I've seen on Twitter. That's kind of cooled down now. Now all of Giants Twitter is saying that we should take Penix 6th overall, which is blowing my mind because they all want to move on from Daniel Jones, who's injury prone. Now they want to bring in a guy that's had 4 season-ending injuries and is a lefty, so his blindside protector would be Evan Neal. So, but as far as Spencer Rattler goes, a couple things. First off, the one thing I don't like about him, played at Oklahoma. He didn't play that well at Oklahoma. That is like the most quarterback-friendly system in all of college football. You go back and you look at his high school. It's all over YouTube. You can look it up. His high school teammates hated him. Him in high school. He had the reputation as a guy that his teammates did not like. So, and I know players could change, but those are some red flags for me. The tools are there enough for me to be like, okay, yeah, in the 3rd round. Like a lot of people say, oh, you know, why even take a quarterback in the 3rd round? Do you see what backup quarterbacks are getting paid today? They're getting paid $9-10 million because teams know how valuable the backup is. Look at all the injuries last year. So if you take a guy like a Spencer Rattler in the 3rd round or a Joe Milton in the 4th round, and all they turn out to be is a backup quarterback, I'm okay with that. Like if they turn out to be something more, that's great. You take a developmental guy with upside and he can develop into more, yeah. But if you take him in the 3rd round and he's a solid backup for 5 or 6 years, that's worth the pick. Backup quarterbacks are valuable. So I'd be okay with any quarterback that they liked in terms of upside in the 3rd round. 2nd round, too early for me for Spencer Rattler. And I don't think the Giants are going quarterback in the 2nd round. If they were, I don't think we make that Brian Burns trade. I think they would have kept the 39th and 47th to have the ability to move back up into the 1st if they wanted to. That kind of is off the table now. I wouldn't say it's completely off the table, but it's much less likely because we traded that pick. So I don't think they're making an emphasis to take a 2nd round quarterback. That's the way I look at it. But 3rd round, I'm okay with it. I don't know if he'll be there, though. I think he'll probably be off the board, but you never know with quarterbacks. They fall.
Absolutely. And that's a good point. I mean, you know, especially with the whole Penix situation, I'm there with you, Chris. I don't know how I feel having, you know, Evan Neal, who has been a complete turnstile, be my quarterback's blind spot. A quarterback who, you know, let's be honest, is injury prone. Now, the tangibles are there. I do think that, you know, if the injury history wasn't there, obviously there'd be a different perspective on the guy because I think he can make all the passes. Very quick, with his processing. Did play behind a fairly solid offensive line in Washington, which the Giants don't have. And in my honest opinion, I mean, it's a risk. It's a big risk that you got to sell to your fan base, knowing you're coming off of a guy who is injury prone, to replace him with another guy who's injury prone. So to me, no.
Yeah,
okay.
and you know as well, and you guys know as well as I do, even if the medicals check out, if Penix were to ever get hurt, like the 1st or 2nd year, Shane would be destroyed. How do you draft a quarterback with the injury history that he had 6th overall when you had a quarterback like Dan? Whether it's fair or whether it's not, I don't see Joe Shane taking that swing that early in the draft. I don't see it.
No, I'm there with you. And again, like I said, it's going to be a hard sell to sell your fan base because, like you said, if God forbid something happens and he goes down, yeah. I mean, how do you explain that to your fan base, knowing that you just paid a guy all this money who's an injury-prone quarterback, and then you go and possibly have to trade up back into the back end of the 1st, or maybe get a little higher in the 2nd, to get a quarterback who, yes, has the tangibles, but was labeled injury prone in the draft. So I'm there with you. Spencer Rattler, though, I remember seeing, especially while he was in high school, people saying that, he wasn't the best teammate. I know he kind of bounced around a little bit in college, but I think the tangibles, I mean, and he's a smaller quarterback too. So my concerns with that, I'm a little wary on smaller quarterbacks, if I'm just being honest. I know it might sound a little prototypical, but I like my quarterbacks a little bit bigger, usually around, the 6'4" range, nice girthy guy. And I mean, I think maybe in the third round, I wouldn't have an issue with it. But like you said, Chris, I think he's going to go a little earlier than that, especially some of these teams, if they're not able to get their guy in the first round or in the second round. Any more comments on Spencer Rattler here before we go to the next one?
No, I think he's just a stash guy. I think he's a stash guy, to be honest with you. I mean, like everyone else was saying, you're not gonna waste a second rounder on him. So if he's a backup quarterback, like the Entertainah was saying, then great. But we're not giving up any sort of valuable draft assets for that. Especially that high up in the draft. So I agree with that. Although he did show some promise, I will give him some credit. He did show some promise. He showed some great tools in South Carolina as opposed to his time in Oklahoma. And I do think that, a couple people in the chat were saying that he's definitely changed since high school in terms of the pure attitude of him. Because we also saw those videos circulating, the practices and going after his teammates. But yeah, no, I don't think that the Giants are making that move that quickly. So absolutely.
His player comp is Christian Hackenberg.
That's what you need to tell me. I'm done.
Exactly.
That's a wrap.
Jonathan Christ says, "What's up, fellas? Do you think the Giants are done with free agency? Heard the Colts safety would be a perfect fit for the Giants." Jonathan, and before I let everyone else go on the panel here, I think they're done with free agency until after the draft. I think after the draft, we'll see a couple more little signings here, but I think nothing more than a vet minimum contract, really. I've heard, about the Colts safety, and, you saw Bobby Okereke, reaching out, dropping some eyes on Twitter, which is nice to see. But I think the Giants might be done until after the draft. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think at this point it's probably. I mean, the Giants are probably just waiting for the markets to completely bottom out to get a bargain for one of these guys. But I think at this point it's probably smart for Schoen to wait until after the draft so he knows what his cap situation's like. Because going into the draft, you could speculate what your cap situation is going to be like after, but you don't know. If you trade up, you're going to have to pay more, right? If you trade up to pick 3, he's a lot more against your cap than a guy like pick 6. So if you're Schoen, I think you want to wait to see how the draft plays out. If you do trade up, if you have less cap situation than you may have thought before the draft. And at this point, you just wait till after the draft, see how everything transpires, and then try to bring in a couple of, affordable free agents before the start of the season. So like you said, I don't expect any more free agency moves until after the draft.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, I'm muted. Excuse me. What do you guys feel?
I agree. I don't think they're going to do anything else as far as free agency is concerned. I mean, the one position that I would have hoped that they would have tried to at least get someone in is cornerback. That's the only position that I see just off rip besides safety. But no, I'm in agreement that I think that they're going to probably just do something probably after the draft, vet minimum somewhere. But I hope that at some point they really will address that cornerback position, the cornerback 2. They really have to address that.
Definitely.
100%.
Absolutely. And that's honestly a perfect transition, to the next topic here. Cornerback 2. The Giants, I feel, while I do trust, our secondary coach, he's proven to, get fairly solid production from, players like, you look at whether that's Cordell Flott, whether you want to look at Nick McLeod, you want to go a little bit further back than that. We've been able to get some pretty decent production from some guys that we've had low expectations for. But that is a genuine concern right now because who are you going to put there? I mean, me personally, I'm looking at pick 47 but who are you going to put there? That's really the biggest question for the Giants. Tana, I'll lead with you here. Are there any corners in this draft or maybe in free agency that you might be looking at for the Giants to address their CB2 spot?
There's a number of corners that I could see the Giants going at in the second. I expect the Giants to address corner in the second round. I should say definitely at some point before the end of day 2, whether it be pick 47 or pick 70. I think they're going to attack the secondary in the draft. If you look at the Tennessee Titans draft history, with Shane Bowen, obviously, when he was the defensive coordinator over there, I think their first defensive pick in every one of their drafts over the last 3 years was a DB. And the Giants did not address the DB at all. in free agency. They're going to lose Adoree Jackson. I think it's just obvious. Like, I think at some point relatively early in this year's draft class, they're going to take a corner. It's just a matter of which one fits the scheme well. I forgot the name of I had a guy actually in my first mock draft in the 4th round because I thought he fit the scheme really well. His player comparison was actually the former corner from the Titans. I'm forget. Let me see. I got it right here. Actually, I had them taking. Where is he? I had him in I had Newbin in the 2nd, the safety. I don't know if he's going to get there. I really like him out of Minnesota, and we clearly could use that too with McKinney. Oh man, the names escape me right now, but I did have a corner in the 4th. But I think we're going a corner. We're going secondary with that 47th pick. That's what I think. I'd be surprised if we don't. When you look at the draft history of our DC and the fact that we didn't address it all in free agency, I think we almost have to. But I also think we're going to sign a veteran corner after the draft too. I would be surprised if we don't. I wouldn't mind if Adoree came back, to be honest with you. If it's cheap, I wouldn't mind it.
No, I'm there with you. I wouldn't mind it either whatsoever. Last time we heard from Adoree, it seemed like he wanted to go to a contender, but with how the market is right now and, teams, filling in their roster, waiting for the draft, I could see that potentially, and I absolutely wouldn't mind it at all. One player in the draft that I personally really, really like is Kool-Aid. Don't think he's going to be there at 47. I think he's going to be a first-round pick, if I'm being honest, maybe the later half. But, I mean, I think he'd be a nice selection for the New York Giants if he's there at 47. CP, do you have anyone potentially that you're looking at, whether that's at 47 or later or free agency to address that cornerback 2 spot?
I don't mean to cut you off. I just remembered the corner's name that I had is taken. Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest. When I looked into him, I thought he fit our scheme really well. So that was the corner.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. That's a nice corner, and especially in the 4th round, I think that'd be really good value. And I like that you went safety with your 2nd round pick because that is a position in need, whether fans want to believe it or not.
Yeah, to answer your question, I don't have anyone up front in terms of that 2nd round pick, but I will say the idea of entertaining an Adoree reunion would be awesome, to be honest with you. We'll see that the markets are always fluctuating, things always change, situations always change. So that would be great. But let's not forget that I think a lot of people, myself included, were very surprised about Nick McLeod's performance, especially toward the tail end of last year. I mean, he played very solid, to be honest with you. So he's not a name to forget. But in terms of the immediate sort of addressing of it, I'm not quite sure. I like McKinstry. I don't think he's going to get down to 47. I think a couple mock drafts have him at mid-20s. So that's a little bit of a pipe dream. But yeah, we'll see. It's definitely something that needs to be addressed. I fully expect this regime to address it, but I don't have any names up front right now for you.
No, I definitely understand, and that's not a problem whatsoever. What about you, Aaron? What about you, Rod? Do you guys have any corners potentially that you may be looking at, whether that's in the draft or free agency for the New York Giants?
Let's go in-house. I believe I'm feeling blue with me and CP. We're on the Trey Hawkins grind. Try to give him another shot. No, I don't know. I
think that ship has sailed, man. I think that ship has sailed. I think it was just a pipe dream from the start, but that's a good one, man.
What about maybe Cordell Flott? I mean, maybe.
I liked him in the nickel last year. I liked him as nickel over Darnay, and they were kind of doing it. But I mean, I hate to say this name, but maybe like an Avonte Maddox or even like Stephon Gilmore just to kind of be there and then draft whoever to kind of bring it in. But I said it last episode. What was it, Max? Was it Max Mitchell from Rutgers? I think he's a good press corner. I wouldn't mind him in the draft. I think we can get him later on in that 3rd or 4th round. But I definitely agree that we'll probably go DB in the later rounds. I'm just not sure who they would want to fit their scheme. But yeah, as far as like free agency for corners, there's really no one out there. It's like I said, like Stephon Gilmore, Avonte Maddox, Xavier Howard's there, but I don't think anybody wants him.
No,
so I think they're just gonna roll with what they got and just kind of go play by committee for that CB2.
I mean, I could see it. I could definitely see it. I mean, the players that you listed are definitely up there in age outside of Maddox, the former Philadelphia Eagle. Gilmore is definitely getting up there in age, had a solid season with the Cowboys, did not look good whatsoever in the playoffs, even though Dallas as a whole didn't look good in the playoffs. But he was definitely an eyesore in the playoffs, giving up coverage. And honestly, I mean, Xavier Howard, I liked him. I mean, I still do, but that's someone that, I mean, for me personally, I don't even know if I would touch with the stick, if I'm being honest. At that point, I'd rather try to bring in an Adoree Jackson or address it in the second round if you can. It's a pretty thin market right now for the secondary in terms of cornerbacks. So that's really a position that the Giants are going to have to address. I mean, there was some players that were rumored for the Giants that were previous players that played under Shane Bowen, haven't been brought in yet. But you got to imagine that has to be a position in a division that the Giants play in with CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, and I could go on. You know, Deontay Banks is definitely going to need some help. I like Nick McLeod, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if Shane Bowen, I don't know if Joe Shane have enough faith to just say, you know what, we're going to give you that position. I don't think they do that whatsoever. Trey Hawkins, I liked him last year. You know, we didn't really see too much of him, but you know, the hype was real last year for him, and you got to hope that, you know, he could develop into a pretty solid player. If not, I'm okay with him being in a backup because, you know, like we were talking about earlier, backups are very important in this league, in my opinion, not just outside of quarterback, but at a lot of different positions. You know, people go wrong with depth. One injury, let's God forbid something happens to Deontay Banks, you're talking about a very thin secondary for the New York Giants. So definitely have to address that there. Rob, before we move on, do you have any players potentially that you're looking at 47 or free agency?
I mean, honestly, it's like Kalen Carson. I like that kid, but there's another kid that we should actually take a look at. His name is Cooper DeJean.
Oh,
he's out of Iowa. Now, the crazy thing is they have him listed as a safety, but he played a lot more cornerback at Iowa. So that's
a
name
to
really look
at. He's a great punt
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's one kid that I'm looking at. As far as how we should address it, I mean, we can wait till after the draft, see what pans out as far as players. You can wait after cut down because at that point you can pretty much get a cornerback on the cheap. But as far as I'm concerned right now, we're going in with who we have right now. I have my reservations as far as put Flott on the outside. I don't trust Darnay Holmes, and even with Darnay, I think he was brought back strictly as a special teams player. So can you feel it? Can he fill in if necessary? Yeah. But they might just go with who they have for right now. I wouldn't mind Adoree Jackson back, but somehow, some way, again, they have to address this position in the draft. They have to.
Yeah, I think DeJean, you talked about that trade down scenario earlier with the Vikings. If they were to do that, I think he's a clear potential target. I don't think he would get the 47, but if we had 11 and 23, yeah, I think he could make a lot of sense with that 23rd pick. And I'll tell you what, I think that opens up the offensive line possibility too. If you trade down to 11, I think then it's very practical to take a tackle there with that 11th pick. I don't want to trade down. I want to get an elite wide receiver at 6, but there's a lot of options you would have if you had those 2 picks, and Cooper DeJean is one of them.
Yeah,
but definitely. also, I mean, with those extra 2 picks, if we did trade them with Minnesota, I get it. We'll miss out on a Dunze, possibly, but we'll miss out on Neighbors. We'll miss out on Harrison. But this wide receiver draft is loaded.
It is. It's deep.
Loaded. It's just a point of finding that wide receiver in the later rounds that fits what Joe Shane and Mike Kafka want to do. I'm sorry, Brian Daboll and Kafka want to do as far as their offense is concerned. I want to just hit on something real quick. I'm kind of liking a Dunze just a little bit better than Neighbors, and here's the reason why. We have a speedy receiver in Jalen Hyatt. We know what Wandale can do. The veteran wide receiver that we have right now is Darius Slayton. So my question is, we draft Neighbors, who's taking a back seat? Because you already know Daniel Jones has a rapport with Darius Slayton. He's building an even better rapport with Wan'Dale Robinson. Who's taking the back seat?
Probably Hyatt.
Yeah,
Probably
Yeah.
Hyatt. If I had to
Probably
guess, he's
Hyatt.
probably the wide receiver 4. I think a lot of Giants. I've seen a lot of Giants fans on Twitter bring up that they like Odunze more than Neighbors. I am not one of those fans, but I see why. I mean, I think all three of them are great. But I think Neighbors could play on the outside. Like I've seen people kind of say that the reason that they want Odunze is because of his contested catch rate, which he definitely has. He's above Neighbors in that sense, but Neighbors could go up and get it, man. To me, Neighbors is not like a strict slot receiver or like Hyde in the sense that he's kind of like a straight go route and relies strictly on his speed. I think Neighbors is a do-it-all receiver, man. I think he'd fit in any offense, and I think he'd really fit well in this offense where you could use him in so many different types of ways. So, but I like both of them. Like I won't be upset at all if we end up with Rome Odunze. I think Odunze would be the number 1 wide receiver in probably 7 out of the last 10 draft classes. This class is just loaded at that position.
Oh no, absolutely it is. And I like that you said that because we know for sure that Brian Daboll loves versatility, right? And I think personally, whether that's Malik, whether that's Marvin Harrison, I mean, those are 2 players that, in my opinion, are versatile players. I mean, especially Malik Neighbors. I mean, quick. We know that he's an electric player, but one thing that I like is that he plays through, whether that's, man-to-man coverage, and he just it looks like almost like he's running through a wall. It doesn't matter how much he's blanketed, does not matter. If you fit the ball in his hands, he's going to catch it. Yeah. He's going to catch it.
He's got that. A lot of people have compared him to Antonio Brown, and I see that before the CTE. I see that. But he does have like that and I know it's like obvious as a Giants fan, you're going to make that natural comparison. LSU, you want the Giants to draft him. But he does have that, like when you watch his game film, Neighbors does have that Odell trait, like you were saying earlier, having that wide receiver that could take that 5-yard slant to the house, that is all over his film. Like if he gets the ball in space, he can take it to the house, and he's strong too. He could fend off defenders. I'm a huge fan of him. I am a huge fan of Malik. I would love if the Giants got Malik Neighbors, but I'm also. We were talking about JJ McCarthy earlier. I actually like JJ McCarthy. I've liked him all along. I've had him as my QB3 all along. I don't want to trade up for him at all. And I think we're gonna have to trade up to get him. I think it's legitimate that he's going in the top 4 or 5, but I wouldn't be upset if we ended up with him either. I wouldn't, but my preference is Neighbors, and I know a lot of Giants fans wouldn't be happy with that, but I think he's a game-changing wide receiver. And the most common knock that I see on Twitter whenever I bring up the possibility of taking a Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze or Marvin Harrison Jr. is who's going to throw him the ball. But like people act like this is like, is Marvin Harrison Jr. going to retire at 22 years old? Like people act like you're not projecting the team for the next 5, 6, 7 years with this draft pick. So for me, that's so much more added pressure for Joe Schoen too when you think about it. The fact that one of these wide receivers are projected to be a Hall of Fame talent doesn't mean it's going to happen, but they are that highly thought of. They are A-plus talents. So Joe Schoen, not only if he were to trade up to get a quarterback, would have to give up draft capital. He would put him into a situation where you give up Barkley and Waller. You have a makeshift offensive line. He'd be bypassing a potential Hall of Fame talent at the wide receiver position. So if he's going to trade up for McCarthy, if he's going to, I mean, I like Drake May. I'd be happy if they trade up for Drake May. But if he's going to trade up for McCarthy, you better be freaking sure, man, because that is a huge gamble to bring in a guy like that, who I admittedly like. I've liked him all along going back to September, October. I don't like him enough to put him in this situation where you have to trade up to get him. I think Minnesota is a perfect fit for McCarthy. If the Giants were in a situation like Minnesota, where they had TJ Hawkinson, where they had Justin Jefferson, where they had Jordan Addison, where they had a good offensive line, I'd be like, give them 2 first-round picks to go up and get him. Mm-hmm. We don't have that on this team. So for me, I think fans are being a little short-sighted when they say that you need to take a quarterback no matter what. That's my opinion. I think it'd be a mistake. But I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Just like I hated the Daniel Jones pick when we made it. I prayed I was wrong. I don't think it's an ideal time to trade up for a quarterback.
And I can definitely.
Let's just say this situation, Chris, sorry about that. Not to cut you off. I just want to say the whole situation of the draft this is how I see it playing out. I truly do think so. You got Marvin Harrison off the board, like I said, to Arizona. You got Neighbors off the board to Los Angeles, who inevitably needs a wide receiver now. So those 2 picks presumably are off the board. And we know the QBs taken before them are what they are. You got Joe Alt there. You got Rome Odunze there. and you got JJ McCarthy there. What's the play? I'm very curious to just ask the panel that. You're presented with those three options. Unless the Giants are going elsewhere, which I don't see. It's one of those three options at that point.
That's a really good question.
I'm gonna say this. I don't. If Joe Schoen likes JJ McCarthy, which he very well might, I don't think the Giants sit at 6, because I don't think they could run the risk of Denver, the Raiders, or Minnesota jumping them. Like, if you really like JJ McCarthy, I can't see them staying at 6 and waiting for him to get there. Even if it's trading up from 6-5 or 6-4, I think they're gonna have to move up, because there's no way of them knowing that one of those teams aren't going to come calling. So I just don't see McCarthy getting to 6. If we want him, I think we're going to trade up, or I think somebody else will.
Yeah, that's a fair point there. I mean, in that scenario, I got to be honest, and I really understand, why people are high on JJ McCarthy. In that situation there, I got to be honest, I might have to go with Dunze. I just might have to go with Dunze. I mean, I think, again, he could do it all. And I think that, he would bring instant credibility to this wide receiver room. I mean, you already have two guys who I think we can all agree are burners in Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt. And honestly, I mean, I think it'd be a nice security blanket for it, whether that's Daniel Jones, whether that's Drew Lock if he starts the season, or if you do get a later round prospect. I mean, and going forward, I think, that'd be a nice security blanket for your quarterback. And outside of that, I mean, I think the numbers speak for itself. The film speaks for itself. I mean, I don't think a lot of fans, again, like we were saying earlier, would be upset if they selected Joe Alt, because the player that you're getting, and it's a position that, until otherwise proven, I mean, it still needs help. It still needs help. And as much as I love Jermaine Illuminor, and, he's been, really just loving the fans, and the fans have been loving him back, haven't seen him yet on the field in Giants blue. I don't want to get my expectations too high. The last time I did, it blew up in my face. So, you got to hope that, the Giants, whether that's at 6, whether that's at 4 or 5, if they believe that they have their guy at quarterback, you got to be damn sure that that's him.
Yeah,
you have to be sure, because I believe, and I know that I've seen other people have this thought process too, but I think it's true. I mean, if you miss on the quarterback, I mean, you're setting back your franchise for about 5 years.
We just saw it happen.
Exactly. Exactly.
The other option I think in that scenario is a trade back. Like, I think that, because the Vikings, the Raiders, the Broncos may want JJ McCarthy. So I think that's an option in that scenario too. But if I had to stay there and pick, and those are my choices, yeah, for me, it's either a Dunze or Alt. I really want to go Alt, because I love the offensive line. But my brain tells me, especially after everything that Joe Schoen did in free agency, shoring up the offensive line as best as he can, pouring the resources into it that he did, ignoring the wide receiver position, my brain tells me if we're not taking a quarterback there, it's going to be wide receiver. So I would say a Dunze, and I'd be very excited if we got him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What about you guys? How are you guys feeling, Big Blue and Aaron?
I don't even know, to be honest. As long as it's someone that's good.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like for some reason Joe Schoen, Daboll are gonna go after like Bo Nix or something, like second round. I just feel like that's like their guy, even though we saw them with Odunze and Michael Penix talking to him at the pro day, and skip Drake Mays because I guess they already watched too much film on him. So like, oh, we're good. We're not going to go to his pro day. But yeah, I feel like Bo Nix somehow is going to end up as a Giant. I don't know why. But I feel like Daboll can be like, well, I can change him. Look what I did with Josh Allen in Wyoming. So I think it's going to be like that. So I still think it'll either be Odunze or Neighbors. If they're both gone, though, I see Joe Schoen trading back. And plus, if Shane really wants one of those top quarterbacks, like a Jane Daniels or any type of those, he will pull a Brandon Bean. He will trade up. He'll get anything he needs to get up there, because he's seen him do it with Josh Allen. So if he really likes these guys, he'll trade up. But if they're all gone, I don't think he's going like a Michael Penix or anything like that first round. So he'll trade down and get whatever's best player available.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. And we know that Joe Schoen, he could be aggressive when he needs to be, right? He traded up last year. He's traded back before. He could be aggressive when he needs to be. So, but at the same time, all of that can be said. And if a team doesn't want to trade out, they're not going to trade out.
Yeah.
So definitely got to keep that in mind. Before we get to some of these comments here, Big Blue, any thoughts real quick before we get on to the next?
I'm hoping the draft goes like this again. 3 quarterbacks off the board. Arizona, you could have Marvin Harrison. I'm fine with that. Los Angeles, the Chargers, they're the ones that's iffy for me because they can go one of two ways: offensive line or wide receiver.
Or they could trade back, and a team could take a quarterback.
Or they could trade back. Yeah, exactly. But if they stay put and they either take Neighbors or Alt, whichever one, Minnesota, one of those teams are going to come calling. Denver, Las Vegas, or Minnesota, they're going to come calling. So at that point, what do you do, as far as Joe Schoen? What do you do? Do you pick up that phone? Do you sit there and say, well, you know what? What are you offering Minnesota? 11 and 23? What else?
And we've seen Joe Schoen get creative with acquired draft picks too. So if he gets 11 and 23, what if it's not like we haven't seen this on draft nights before where players get traded? What if the 49ers are like, yeah, we'll trade Brandon Ayuk for the 23rd pick in a future second? Maybe you could flip it and get a wide receiver that way and get a tackle. It's just options if he trades down. There's options. T. Higgins was tagged. A lot of people felt the Cincinnati Bengals may trade him. So it gives you more options if you acquire more draft capital.
That's a good point.
Definitely.
No, because we haven't even really spoken about that, to where the Giants, if they were to trade back, can use one of those picks to trade for another player. I mean, they just used one of their picks to trade for Brian Burns.
And Darren Waller the year before.
Exactly. So, I mean, and you've seen teams do it throughout the league, whether that's Philly trading with Tennessee for A.J. Brown. I mean, it can
Bills
it
for
can be
Stephon
done.
Diggs.
Yeah, Bills for Stephon Diggs.
Yeah. And Joe Schoen was in that room when it happened, so he knows what he's doing.
That's a very
You know what I don't want to have happen? You know what I don't want to have happen? And this is something that's been like gnawing at me like the last couple of weeks. Because we can all talk about the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, the O-linemen. I don't want to have a scenario where the Giants trade back and let's say Darren Waller's not on this squad and the Giants know that he's not going to be on the squad and they go and take Brock Bowers. I don't want to have that happen. So I'm not going to speak it into existence, but no one's thrown the name Brock Bowers out there because no one wants to see it happen.
Maybe you guys aren't going to like this thing. I wouldn't hate Brock Bowers at 11.
I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't like it at 6, but at 11, first off, I don't think he's getting there. I think he makes way too much sense for the Jets at 10. Like win now team, Aaron Rodgers, they spent all that money on the offensive line. But I think Brock Bowers is one of the 5 best players in this draft. I know he plays tight end, but if you get that dude at 11, I'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
And I think it's just it's just the sort of just the feel for the tight end, right? I mean, you have so many positions of need right now. You're going tight end with this first draft pick. I don't know. It's just the aura of that pick. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. And honestly, I think that's really the perfect transition to actually the comment that I was going to highlight here. The Matthew 4:15 says, what tight ends are you interested in? I don't care if Waller is back or not. Have to get a tight end. Man, I mean, listen, I like Brock Bowers. I think that he can be really not just a security blanket, but just a weapon for your corners. I mean, I think personally, for me, I like Sanders a lot. I think, if you can get Sanders, I mean, do it. I don't know if he'll be there at 47 personally. That's just me. But Sanders, to me, is my tight end too. And I like him a lot. The more I watch, I mean, there's some things in his game that he needs to work on. I don't think him and Brock are on the same level. But I think he's an exceptional player, and in the right system, absolutely, I believe he could be your tight end 1. Because I like Daniel Bellinger, and I think he's a very solid player, but I don't know necessarily if I view him as that tight end 1 going forward for the Giants, if hypothetically speaking, Darren Waller does in fact retire. But I think a guy like Sanders, I think he could come in and be your tight end 1. Just me personally. What about you guys? Are there any tight ends in this draft that you guys like outside of whether that's Brock Bowers or Sanders or?
I like Sanders a lot. He's one. There's about 5 guys I like at pick 47. He's one of them. Another guy that I love at pick 47 is Chris Jenkins. Like I would love the Giants to take Chris Jenkins at 47. To me, he's like such a natural replacement for a guy like Leonard Williams who could play. He's 300 pounds. He can play both in the 3-4, 4-3. You could line him up all over the defensive line. I would love him. But yeah, Sanders is definitely one of my targets in the second round. I mean, obviously it's a need, but I don't view tight end as one of our 5 or 6 biggest needs. Like we need more depth on the offensive line as far as I'm concerned. I know we spent a lot there. We need more depth on the defensive line. We need a quarterback. We need a wide receiver. We could probably use more linebacker depth. We certainly need help in the secondary. So I like Sanders though. I think he's worth the pick at 47. I do, like you said, I do think he has potential to be a really good tight end in the league, but it's not a position that I feel like the Giants need to have coming out of this draft, right? They brought in 2 good blockers at the tight end position in free agency. I'm leaning they won't go at least early, maybe late in the draft, but I don't think they'll go tight end in the first 2 days of this year's draft. No. Unless a Brock Bowers situation. If they traded down to 11, he was there. That's possible, but I'm not expecting it.
No, and I'm there.
Honestly, sorry, Chris. I don't honestly think that they're going to probably address it. And here's the reason why. Regardless of whether Waller's back or not, what was he really offering you? Because he was just another weapon for Daniel Jones. You pick up a Malik Neighbors or a Dunze, that's pretty much kind of replacing Waller. Plus, you still have those other guys, I believe is Stinson and the other kid
the dude we picked up from the Eagles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Jack Stoll, I believe.
Jack Stoll.
Exactly. Yeah, Stoller. Yep. Those guys are good blocking tight ends, which frees up Daniel Bellinger to be able to go out and catch passes. So the way I'm looking at it is that regardless of whether or not Waller plays, I think the players they acquired helps out in different ways to be able to benefit Daniel Bellinger.
I can see that.
Open up their offense just a little bit more. Because remember now, Waller playing last season, Daniel Bellinger, because of how the old line was playing horribly, Daniel Bellinger was kept in to block because Waller isn't a real blocking tight end. So do I see them addressing the tight end in the draft? Possibly, but maybe later on. I don't see them addressing it any earlier than
day 3.
Maybe the 3rd round, 4th round. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm definitely there with you. I don't think it's going to be early whatsoever. We definitely have quite a bit of people in the chat. I want to try to get to some of these comments real quick. Actually, I think this is a great question here. From 3 Cows, who is on the interior D line with Sexy Dexy?
I just threw out a name. I love Chris Jenkins out of Michigan in this draft. If we want to go that route, there's Fisk. I think his name is Brandon Fisk. There's another guy. There's another guy who's a 2nd round target on the interior defensive line. I definitely think I'm not saying they will. I'm still thinking they're going to go secondary there, but I definitely think that's a possibility. You look at the defensive coordinator we brought in here, and I like that, man. To me, he's more like Patrick Graham in terms of his defensive philosophy. And I know a lot of Giants fans didn't like Patrick Graham. I liked him. I thought he was a decent defensive coordinator. I view Bowen having a similar defensive philosophy to Graham, but now he has the pieces necessary to make this type of defense work. When Patrick Graham was here, he didn't have Kayvon Thibodeau. He didn't have Brian Burns. Now, when you have this type of defense, you need a really strong defensive line. So, if you're asking 6-7 guys to drop back on coverage consistently, last year Tennessee blitzed, I think, the fewest amount in the NFL. Like, if you add up the amount of times the Titans blitzed over the last 2 years, it doesn't equal the amount of times the Giants blitzed last year alone. So it's going to be a completely different defensive strategy. And when you don't apply extra pressure, you got to be really strong up front. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Giants spend an early pick on the defensive line in this draft. And yeah, like I said, I think Jenkins is a possibility. Fisk, those are 2 guys you want to keep your eye out on draft night at pick 47.
Yeah, I like Braden Fisk too. Big, strong defensive lineman. I mean, I don't like him because he's from Florida State. It's all about the U, but I wouldn't mind having him on the Giants.
Yeah, I'm there with you guys. Those are two names I think would instantly bolster this defensive line. Another name that you could throw out there is Tavondre Sweat out of Texas. I mean, he has size that I think if you pair him next to Dexter Lawrence, I mean, you're talking about a wall for offenses having to run through.
You get another good interior defensive lineman with Dex and Burns and Kayvon.
Oof.
Giants can be back to their roots real quick. So
absolutely,
I wouldn't be upset at all if they went that way.
No, and I don't think he could be. I mean, especially whether that's Jenkins, whether that's Sweat. I mean, those are guys that can not only help stop the run, but they could get to the quarterback too. So I don't think that they would be in a bad position there whatsoever. Tudo, he says, massive salutes to Chris 1, Chris 2, Lil CP, Lil Ronnie, and all diehard Giants fans across the pond. And F players flip 2 boys. Tudo, sometimes
where did CP go? He dropped out.
I think he dropped out for a little bit. He might be back. But Tudo, you know it's always love, man. You always show this channel love. I really appreciate you for stopping by, man. Thank you so much. Let me see here. Hold on. Boom. 3 Cal says, because I've seen this a lot in the Bears community. Y'all are going to be shocked when the Bears trade up for one of the big 3 wide receivers. I could see that because they have, I believe, what is it, the 9th overall pick?
Yeah.
They still have next year's first. If you think that there's a guy there, I mean, everybody's talking about Denver. They're talking about Las Vegas. You have the Bears right there. Why not get your guy?
I think, and we'll see on draft night. I think they're going to get Rome Odunze at 9. I don't think they're going to have to trade up because the way I look at it is I do believe 4 quarterbacks are going in the first 5 picks. I think somebody's trading up. I don't know if it's going to be Minnesota, Denver. I think somebody's trading up. So if I believe that, I think the next 2 are going to be Harrison and Neighbors in any specific order. Joe Alt, I think, goes to Tennessee. And then who is the Falcons? The Falcons have weapons all over. So I think Odunze gets to the Bears at 9. I don't think they're going to have to trade up to get him. That's my prediction right now.
That's a good point. That is a good point there. And honestly, I think if there's any wide receiver in that big 3 that can fall, I think it is Odunze. I don't think Neighbors falls past the Giants if they do stick at 6. And Marvin Harrison is not falling that far. So I think Odunze would be the guy. But at the same time, they did also just, trade for Keenan Allen. You still have DJ Moore there. So it's not like it's a pressing need. I think, honestly, we was just talking about Brock Bowers going to the Jets. I could see the Bears taking him at 9 and pairing him with Cole Kmet. And you got yourself a nice group of weapons there and a security blanket for your new quarterback.
That would be a hell of a dynamic duo right there at the tight end spot if you do that.
Absolutely. And then you
tight end cross all night.
Exactly. And honestly, I mean, if you're a Bears fan, you got to be excited. So definitely, that's a good take there because that's something that I feel like a lot of people are considering that they potentially could trade up. Fellas, let's get to the last topic here because I think this is a very important topic. Year 3 for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. Yeah. Now, you have some people who are already putting, these guys on the hot seat already. You have some people that are saying, no, I'm gonna give them another 2 years. This is still a rebuild. I have my own opinions on what I think year 3 is for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, but I want to hear your guys' opinions. Tana, where do you stand with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll in year 3? Do you think it's a hot seat for them? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, do I want it to be a hot seat? No. Like when these guys took the job, I know that they inherited a horrible situation. I think Daboll has shown a lot of promise. Does he have things to work on? Yeah, that's most coaches in the NFL, especially who've never coached before. Do I think, does he need to work on his relationship maybe with some of the guys from within the staff? Sure. At least some of the things that have leaked out. He has things that he could work on. Do I want him to be on the hot seat? No. I don't think Joe Schoen's on the hot seat no matter what. Like a lot of people say he's got to draft a quarterback or he could lose his job. I don't believe that. I think Joe Schoen is getting at least 4 years. Dave Gettleman got 4 years. I'm not so sure about Daboll. I'm leaning that Daboll is going to get 4 years, but I'm not completely sold on that. This is the NFL at the end of the day. And if you have 2 abysmal years in a row, it's hard to keep your job, regardless of how good he did in his first year. That's just the reality of the situation. Will I be calling for it? No. I want Daboll to be here for the next, at least get 2 more years with Joe Schoen. But if the team wins 4 or 5 games and you don't draft a quarterback, and you let this past year, you pointed all the blame to everybody else. You blame the offensive line coach. You blame the defensive coordinator. What does Joe Schoen got to do to save his job? If he fires Brian Daboll and brings in a head coach, that gives him more job security, because then he says to Mara, well, you got to give me at least 2 years with the new head coach. So could I foresee a scenario where Daboll gets fired? I could. Am I predicting that? No. I think Daboll's a good coach. I think he's going to right the ship. I think this team will be competitive. I think they're going to win at least 7, 8 games next year. And if they do that, I don't think Daboll's got anything to worry about. But if the team wins 4 games, I'd be lying to you. If I said that I would be 100% certain that Daboll would be back. I've seen it happen too many times with the Giants, with the Jets. Eric Mangini was on top of the world his first year after he coached the New York Jets. Eric Manginius. 2 years later, after they bombed 2 years in a row, he's gone. If I would have told you 2 years ago that Mike Vrabel was going to be out of a job 2 years later, you would have said I'm nuts. But that's the nature of the NFL. And if you have 2 really disappointing years in a row, it's hard to keep your job. So I do think Daboll, the pressure's turned up a little bit on Daboll. And I think if I'm Daboll, I want them to take the wide receiver, because I know my job's on the line this year, or it's at least starting to be on the line. And I got to try to win as many games as I can. So that's the way I would look at it, rather than forcing a quarterback pick. And ultimately, that's what I think they're going to do. But yeah, I think Daboll could be on the hot seat, but only if it was like a catastrophic season. Like, it would have to be like a 4 or 5-1 season.
Yeah, I'm definitely there with you, man. I mean, I have a lot of faith in Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. I think personally, if you were to flip last year, their second year with their first year, I think we'd have a different perspective on the two, because you overachieve in the first year. Second year, you kind of fall on your face a little bit. And no, you're right. I mean, if they do go this year without addressing that quarterback position or getting their guy in the draft, I mean, and it goes to the can. I mean, who else do you have left to blame at that point? Now, me personally, I do think that, these two need some time to rebuild this team and get this ship steered in the right direction. You have some promising players. We've seen games where, okay, we need this, but they're not like a team like Carolina or New England that is just devoid of talent. They have a star left tackle in Andrew Thomas. Not a lot of teams can say that. Potentially, you might have a top 10 defensive line room with now the addition of Brian Burns, and you pair him with Kayvon.
Defensive line room.
I wanted to say it, but I'm.
It's good, man. It could be really good.
But
I get you.
No, for me, I just last year I really thought this team could go 11-6. I thought Daniel Jones could take that big step forward. So this year, I'm more just. I do think that I'm more cautious. I'm more cautious. I had a lot of heartbreak, which I'm sure a lot of Giants fans like myself did last year. But yeah, no, for me personally, I mean, we got to give these guys time. We can't just keep cycling coaches in and out of East Rutherford. I mean, what is that going to do us? Because it hasn't done us anything. It didn't do us anything with Pat Shermer. It didn't do us anything with Ben McAdoo. It didn't do us anything with Joe Judge. We got to have faith in these guys and let them do their jobs. Now, like you said, Tana, you look at the Mangini situation, you look at Vrabel. I mean, those are two guys alone. I don't think if you were to ask their fan bases at that time, fast forward a couple years, do you think they'll be gone? They probably would have told you no. But with how the league is and, things happen. I mean, for me personally, I think this is a big year for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. Of course. I think if you are able to get that quarterback, that's going to build you a little bit of time. To where let's get this guy, let's develop him. We're going to need another 2 years. So I feel me personally, when you look at the Giants, when you look at John Mara, who I know a lot of people like to say is a meddler, I think John Mara is going to give these guys time to build this team in their vision. And I think they're headed in the right direction. I know a lot of fans, you look at Dallas, you look at Philly. These are teams that seem to, every year just turn it around and just keep building on their momentum. When is it going to be the Giants' chance? I think that chance comes soon, but we got to do this the right way. And
I agree with you. By no means am I calling for. I don't want it. The Giants win 3 games next year. I'm not going to want to fire Daboll, but I just know the reality of the situation. I think it's possible if it was a catastrophic situation, but I think there's a lot of positives to take out of last year from Daboll. Now, Obviously, there's negatives too. I hated the way that he handled Daniel Jones the first game of the year, leaving him in against the Dallas Cowboys when you're down 40-0. Like, what are you doing? And there was definitely a lot of other questionable things that he did. You didn't like the things that you heard about him and Wink Martindale, but the fact that this team fought as hard as they did for him down the stretch when they had nothing to play for. We saw the same situation with Joe Judge. They rolled over and died for him. They had nothing to play for. They beat the Rams, I think, right? I think we beat the Rams. They beat the Packers. They beat the Packers.
They beat the Packers.
They almost beat the Rams. They beat the Eagles. They played the Eagles tough the second time. So they were playing playoff teams down the stretch with nothing to play for, and they kept fighting for him. So I think there's some positives to take out of last year, too, with Brian Daboll, that the team fought hard. I think that is the sign of a good coach. I do think Dable's going to get this team down the right path. And I think we're going to be better this year than people think. Because I believe in Daboll. I do. I think they're going to win 8 games at least. I don't think we're going to be a 3 or 4 win team. I think we're going to be a solid team this year. I really do. I think we'll be competitive.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a lot of things that factor into last year. I mean, just look at the offensive line alone and the carousel that we saw week in and week out. They're putting this player here, seeing if this works. Okay, it didn't work. This player here the next game. I mean, there was no consistency to the offensive line really until Justin Pugh came. And then you're banking on a player coming off the couch to give you production. I mean, I think that says it, all right there with just the offensive line and just how putrid it was last year. But when we saw some stability, and you saw what Brian Daboll was able to do with an undrafted rookie and Tommy DeVito, who I like the kid, but I think he's a limited quarterback compared to what a Drake May or a JJ. So if you're able to get that production out of a Tommy DeVito, you're able to make Tyrod Taylor look like a more than serviceable quarterback to where he gets a contract with the Jets this free agency. I mean, me personally, I'm in the same boat with you, Tana. I mean, I have a lot of faith in Brian Daboll. I think if he could just get his guy, even if it's a developmental player, a player that he can give, he doesn't have to be thrown out there to the wolves. He could sit behind Drew Lock. He could sit behind Daniel Jones. We know that this is a complex scheme. We've heard players talk about it with Brian Daboll. Give the guys some time. I think this Giants team will be fine.
Yeah, and if you take a 3rd or 4th round quarterback, that doesn't prohibit you from taking a quarterback early in the next year's draft if you feel the need to, or trading for a veteran if you need to, whatever. Like, all your options are still open the following year. And the way that I look at this Giants team, at least in terms of what I think they're going to be next year, like based off what they did in free agency, I think they're going to be like the Cleveland Browns last year. Like in terms of their philosophy, they're going to be a team that tries to run the ball a lot. They're going to try to, similar to what they did in 2022, but this year they're going to have a much better defense. They're going to rely on that strong pass rush, and they're going to try to grind out and win football games and limit mistakes. And that's what I see, and have one big playmaker like a Malik Neighbors that could change the game on one play. That's the type of team I envision the Giants being in 2024. Rely on that defense. Don't make mistakes on offense. Have 1 or 2 game-breaking plays from your big playmaker throughout the course of the game.
And I could definitely see that. Absolutely. Especially if you get a guy like Neighbors or Harrison. Those are guys that instantly help your quarterback. Whether that's a Drew Lock or a DeVito or a later round quarterback like a Milton. These are players that can instantly come in and help your team. And I think this Giants team is headed in the right direction. Giants fans, I know we've been in hell the last decade, but we just got to be just a little bit more patient. And I understand the people that aren't. I'm kind of one of those.
How could you not understand it? It's horrible, but
it is.
You're also speaking the reality of the situation, though. Some people don't want to hear it, and I get it, but that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, how are you feeling with year 3 for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll? Do you believe that they're on the hot seat potentially? How are you feeling going forward for this team?
No, I don't see them on the hot seat. This is finally their first year where it's their money. It's not necessarily with Dave Gettleman to have that vice grip their first 2 years in where they didn't really have much cap space. They had to either cut players or restructure contracts just to get a good amount of money. So I think after this year, depending on the record, like we've been talking about, it could get a little murky. But as far as this year, I see us winning like 8 or 9 wins, depending on like how the draft goes for us. But I think it's going to be pretty successful. But listen, they were calling for Coughlin's head year 3, and then we won the Super Bowl. I'm not saying we're going to win the Super Bowl, but I'm just saying RELAX. Just got to relax with Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. They're in the right direction. And I can see the frustration in the Giants fans because we are the Cleveland Browns. So I don't want us to admit that, but we are worse than the Cleveland Browns.
We're worse than since our last Super Bowl, we're the worst team in the NFL. I mean, over the course of that span, we didn't. Maybe the Jets have been worse. That's about it.
No, I think it has been us, and the Browns only won 1 game in 2 years, and we still are worse than them. So I can understand that. But as far as this comment, Xavier Leggett, I'm staying away from him. He had 1 good year. It was his senior year, and it was only for like 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. We don't need him.
Is that the dude from South Carolina?
Yes.
I actually like him. I like him.
Oh, really? I know. I'm
yeah,
like, I'm good.
Yeah. That's what makes the draft fun, man. Everybody's got
he's like a Ramses Barden, just kind of there on the squad. If we drafted him, he's not like an impact player, but that's all I got.
No, I definitely understand. Rod, how are you feeling about year 3 for Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll?
I wouldn't necessarily say they're on the hot seat, but the Daniel Jones saga, that's really, really painting the picture for a lot of fans right now because of how they dealt with Daniel Jones, the contract with Daniel Jones, how last year turned out with Daniel Jones. It's like, to a lot of fans, they've hitched their wagon to Daniel Jones, and it's pretty much going to be their demise from a lot of fans' standpoint.
I disagree with that, but I understand why fans feel that way, but I disagree with that.
Yep. Oh, no, that's perfectly fine there, Entertainah. That's not how my outlook is, but I know a lot of fans have that outlook to where because they gave him that contract, that clock started ticking.
I get it. I mean, fans look at it like you gave that guy $160 million. That's your guy. But the way that I always looked at that deal in that situation was the Giants didn't. And listen, people could make their arguments and say what they want to say in hindsight and yada, yada, yada. But the Giants, think of it from the mindset of a GM and not Madden, and put yourself in the mind of Joe Schoen. You're picking 25th. And for people that said, oh, you could have just started Tyrod Taylor. Okay, but what if Daniel Jones signs with a team like the Tampa Bay Bucks and he did what Baker Mayfield did last year, which is not out of the realm of possibility. People were writing Baker Mayfield off. That is a very real possibility if you were to let Daniel Jones go and the team makes the playoffs and they win a playoff game and your team bombs. There was way too much risk. There wasn't enough reward for Joe Schoen not to bring Daniel Jones back. I always knew he was coming back. The only question was it going to be a tag or was it going to be a contract? And I think the initial plan was to tag him. That's why they went to Barkley in season. Barkley wasn't willing to play ball. So they said, well, if we're going to sign Jones, we have to keep Barkley because we got to give him a chance. We have no weapons on this team. So they tagged Barkley. They could only use 1 tag. And they essentially gave Daniel Jones 2 tags. That's what that contract really works out to be.
Yep,
like 2 franchise tags. Yeah, where you could move the money around. I completely understand why they did it. Just because something is rational doesn't mean it's always going to work out. The Giants were in a tough spot. And I get why fans feel that way, but I disagree. I think they made that contract in a way where they can get out of it if something catastrophic were to happen like last year, and it left all their options open. They didn't do like what the Eagles did with Jalen Hurts, where it was like a 7-year commitment, or what the Bengals did with Burrow, or like a true franchise quarterback contract. This was more of a trial basis contract, a very well-paid trial basis contract, because quarterbacks get paid very well in today's NFL. But that's the way I always looked at it, man. I looked at it like 2 franchise tags where you still have all your options open if things don't go well after year 1. And I think that was the plan. I think Joe Schoen's plan when he made that deal was, listen, it's entirely possible it could work out like Alex Smith did with the Chiefs, and we could patchwork this team for 2 years before we go and get our quarterback. Or maybe he does grow and he becomes a true franchise quarterback, and then we're willing to open up the Brinks truck for him. That was the way I always looked at the deal. And in the end, I think Schoen stays true to that plan. I don't think we'll be drafting an early quarterback. I think he's going to do what he intended to do when he signed Jones. He's going to give himself 2 years to build this team before he brings in the true successor for Daniel Jones. That's what I'm predicting going into the draft. But yeah, I get why fans feel that way. I definitely respect that opinion. I just disagree with it. I don't think they tied themselves to Daniel Jones. I think they had no choice but to sign Daniel Jones if you're thinking from the realistic standpoint of a general manager in the NFL. I don't care what anybody tells me on Twitter. I don't care what all the Madden players tell me. There's not a general manager in the NFL in the exact situation that Joe Schoen was in last year, winning a playoff game with a 25-year-old quarterback that would not have brought back Daniel Jones. The question was it going to be a tag or was it going to be a multi-year extension? And if Barkley wasn't a free agent at the same time, it would have been a tag, but he was. And the Giants looked at it like, if we sign him to this deal, we'll be able to bring in a Bobby Okereke. We'll be able to extend Andrew Thomas. We'll be able to extend Dexter Lawrence. And if we were to tag Jones, we would just have to backload all of our contracts, and it's still going to negatively affect our future cap to be able to get under the cap in 2023. So there was no perfect answer there. It was just the reality of the situation. That's the way I look at it. And unfortunately, we rolled craps, and Daniel Jones got hurt, and he didn't look good before it. But I still think Schoen could turn this team around. Look around the league, man. The Eagles, they signed Carson Wentz. Didn't work out. They quickly pivoted. There's so many examples. You got the Rams with Jared Goff. They pivoted, even though he's looking good now with Detroit. Like, there's so many examples, and I think it just gave Joe Schoen the flexibility to do whatever he wants the next 2 years and continue to build the team. So I know fans like to harp on it, and they want to say, I told you so, and blah, 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 blah. But I don't know, man. I would have made the same exact decision Joe Schoen did. I'm not changing my opinion just based off of last year. Obviously, if I could get in a DeLorean and know what was going to happen in the future, yeah, of course, I don't sign Daniel Jones. But without the power of hindsight, I would have done the same exact thing that he did. So I'm not going to kill him for it. For me, the evaluation for Joe Schoen comes now. How does he pivot? How does he pivot? How does he build his team?
Good point. No, that's a very good point. And I'm in the same boat with you, Tana. I mean, I think, look, they weren't going to trade up to 1 like the Panthers did to get their quarterback. And I mean, when you have
there's no way Mara would have allowed that. That's for sure.
Exactly. They weren't going to. And me personally, listen, I take heat all the time on Twitter for it. I was one of the people that was actually excited that they extended Daniel Jones, just due to the fact that in my mind, I said, okay, this is a 2-year deal. He looked pretty decent in the playoffs, considering that he was going against a very bad defense. But I felt if the offensive line could take a step forward, another year under Brian Daboll, get him some form of weapons, whether that's the draft, whether that's free agency, Barkley coming back. In my mind, I thought, okay, this guy, if he could take a step forward like he did this year, he could take a step forward, then I have no problems with the contract. And me personally, look, the contract is what it is. It happens. And that's why I say I'm with you. How does Joe Schoen pivot off of this? Because we've seen other teams pivot. You look at, like you just said, the Carson Wentz situation, the Jimmy Garoppolo situation. I mean, look at San Francisco. While they didn't pay Trey Lance, they gave up the farm for him.
Listen, what San Francisco did for Trey Lance is far more catastrophic than what the Giants did for Daniel Jones. I mean, you negatively affect your cap for 2 years. 49ers give up 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance. So, yeah, listen, the bottom line is this. Can Joe Schoen build this team properly? If he can, we're going to be a good team sooner than later. Like, fix the trenches, get a pass rush, get an offensive line. Because I'm going to tell you what, all we should care about as fans is winning a Super Bowl. And our only chance to win a Super Bowl, look around in the NFC. Look who we're going to have to go through. You're going to have to block Nick Bosa. You're going to have to block the Eagles pass rush. You're going to have to block some nasty dudes over there with the Dallas Cowboys. So if you expect to advance in the playoffs against these teams, you better be able to block. And you better be able to get after the quarterback. So at the end of the day, I don't see any magician coming in here and fixing this team at the quarterback position. I'm not saying we don't need to improve it. We do. I think we do need to get a long-term answer at the quarterback position. I don't think Daniel Jones is the long-term answer. But the bottom line is you're not going to out Pat Mahomes. I say it all the time. And Pat Mahomes had like the best defense in football this year, by the way. But you're not going to out Pat Mahomes. That's not how we're going to win a Super Bowl, which is the ultimate goal. To beat the Chiefs, you got to beat them the same way we beat Tom Brady. You have to have a great offensive line, you have to have a great pass rush, and you have to have a quarterback that can make big plays when it matters most. But until we get this foundation established where we're strong on both sides of the ball at the line of scrimmage, it's all just bullshit, in my opinion, because I don't see a magician coming in here with the state of the offensive line. It's going to fix this team. So that to me is the core problem, is fix the line. And I definitely think Joe Schoen went a long way towards fixing the pass rush this offseason. So long term, I definitely love the forward trajectory of this team because I think we have a really good pass rush now. And even though I think the offensive line is far from a finished product, I think it's improved. How improved is it? We'll find out.
It's better than the Patrick Amon ways of the world. Yeah, that's for sure. Brett Jones, James Brewer.
Yeah.
No, yeah, you gotta hope. And no, and I agree. And I think again, if they can, because you want players like Evan Neal to take a step forward, right? I've said on previous streams, I think that if Evan Neal doesn't take that step forward, for me personally, I think that's a big stain on Joe Schoen
It is.
personally.
I agree with that.
A top 10 pick on a player who a lot of people, and still to this day, I mean, hindsight's one thing. We could always look to the past, but Evan Neal was the number one offensive tackle in that draft class by the majority. Most people consider
I wanted him. I was thrilled when we drafted him.
Oh, I was so excited when the Giants drafted him, because all you ever heard from Giants fans, people across the league, was the Giants have now two cornerstone offensive linemen who are now young, who are big bodies and players that can, when you look at especially the college tape, I mean, what's not to like? But obviously he hasn't really panned out. Gotta hope he could take that step this year. I think last year, me personally, I don't think it was obviously Evan's best year, but I mean, when you're playing on injury, I think that really does affect your play a lot, especially at the offensive line position when you're consistently moving on a down-to-down basis. And it really showed when you really look at Evan Neal last year. I mean, it showed he was playing injured, and I hope that he could take that step forward this year. Maybe they kick him into guard. I hope they've had those conversations with him, because I think Jermaine Illuminor, I mean, when you look at his record, especially in recent years, I mean, I think personally, I mean, if we could just get average offensive tackle play from him, I mean, I'm okay with that. Me personally, I'm okay with that, because we haven't had average offensive tackle play at the right tackle spot. So, and interior still to me, a glaring need, because you really only bring in John Runyon, and you have some other players, that you bring in through free agency. But
maybe a Zudu you hope develops, but yeah, it's a complete crapshoot.
Yeah, it's a crapshoot right now. So, Giants fans, again, we just need to be patient. I know a lot of us want this to be done in 1 year. There are teams that do it in 1 year. Don't get me wrong, but I think this team is closer than a lot of people think. And I think that, similar to what we were saying earlier, this team, I could see them winning eight games this upcoming season. But, it's all going to come down to really the trenches for me. How is the offensive line going to look? I wonder if Daboll's going to be calling plays this year. I know a lot of people have that, that question in mind. I don't think they're going to say anything until week 1, if I'm just being honest. I think they're really keeping that close to the vest.
I think if the Giants do draft a quarterback early in this draft, which I certainly think is a possibility, like they're clearly doing their homework. I don't think it's a smokescreen. I do think they're doing their homework, as they should. They're picking at the top of the draft. It's a strong quarterback draft class. If they do draft a J.J. McCarthy or a Drake May, or one of these higher thought of quarterback prospects, I do think Daboll's going to call the plays, because the way I look at it, if I'm Daboll, I don't want what happened to Daniel Jones to happen to the next quarterback, where it's constant turnover with the play caller. Like, I was brought in here to mentor the quarterback. That's what I do. That's what I do well. I did a great job with Tua Tagovailoa at Alabama. That's why I got the job with Buffalo. I did a great job with Josh Allen. That's why I'm in the position that I'm in. If I'm going to draft a quarterback, I'm going to be calling the plays from the start. So if they do draft an early quarterback, I expect Daboll to be calling the plays. If they don't, I think you let Kafka continue to call the plays, because he's been the play caller for Daniel Jones the last 2 years. You don't rock the boat with the coaching staff. That probably wouldn't make Kafka very happy, being that limits his possibility of becoming a head coach down the line, which I'm sure is his goal. So if they draft an early quarterback, I think Daboll will be calling the plays. If they don't, I think Kafka will be calling the plays.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in some form, especially if Daboll does get his guy, he's going to want to put his fingerprints over it. He's going to want to. And I don't think management and the Giants organization doesn't give Kafka that boost in his pay if he's not going to call plays. That's just me, though. I can honestly see Kafka calling plays this year, and if not, I'm okay with that too, because we've seen Brian Daboll as a play caller be more than sufficient, especially with Buffalo. So
I don't hate Kafka either, by the way. I actually like Kafka. I think he didn't have much to work with last year, but I agree with you. I want Daboll to eventually take over as the play caller. I think he's better.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things that really we're not going to know until like week one. We might hear some rumors in training camp, and as we get closer to week one, but we're not going to know until then. And you're going to see people, speculating on Twitter. You're going to have people. I think it was Justin Pennick last year who put a little clip together on whether Brian Daboll was calling plays or not. In one
I
of the
saw that.
emails.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like you're going to see more of that this year because it's a real question. It's a real question because I think had it be his way, Mike Kafka wouldn't be here. He wouldn't be here right now. But he's here, so I hope that the Giants will give him that leeway of calling plays, especially for someone that, whether Giants fans want to believe it or not, I think there are teams throughout the league that do view Mike Kafka fairly high. There's a reason why he's getting these interviews as a head coach, or excuse me, for head coaching positions. So maybe next year is that year for him. We'll see. But me personally, I mean, I really do think that Kafka is going to be calling plays. Even if they do bring in a quarterback, I still feel Kafka is going to call plays, but Brian Daboll will put his fingerprints on that, which he should. He's the head coach, and he can. He's the head coach. So I'm not going to have any issues with that. Fellas, that's really all I had, for today. I appreciate every single one of you guys stopping by. Really means a lot. No, CP had to stop a little earlier. We'll definitely have him on the next stream. Tana, I appreciate you making the time and coming on the channel. Always means a lot. Everyone knows where they can find you, but for the few that may be watching that don't, where can these lovely people find you?
Yeah, Entertainah Talking Sports. I'll definitely be doing some live streams as the draft gets closer and continue to talk about this team. But I had a lot of fun coming on here, man. I always love talking with, real true Giants fans. And yeah, man, I wish nothing but success for you guys building your platform. And yeah, hopefully we have a fun year this year. Hopefully there's something to talk about. I just can't wait till the draft's over, man, because I'm sick of the bickering and the bitching and the this and the that. I just want to know what we're gonna do. That way people could bicker and bitch about what they did. But I'm done with the constant every time you go on. This is how I know that Giants fans are just so desperate for a quarterback. And like I said at the top of the stream, you don't shop hungry. But every week I go on Twitter, it's a new quarterback. It used to be Drake May, then it was JJ McCarthy. Now it's Michael Penix. Like they want a quarterback no matter what. And to me, that would be a mistake. You don't just draft a quarterback to draft a quarterback. And as much as it may piss some Giants fans off, that's how I feel. And if they love one, go up and get your guy. Go up and get your guy and do it. I'm all for it. It's the most important position. But the way I look at it, I don't see a guy that's going to come in here and is going to CJ Stroud did with the Houston Texans. Drake May is a possibility. I'm a big fan of Drake May, even though I do think he's developmental because his mechanics are not very good right now, but he has the raw tools. Like he's Josh Allen-esque. Like that's exactly why I always thought he would be the fit for the Giants because he's got the arm. He's got the size. He could run people over. You could see a top 5 potential quarterback in him. So if he's available, I could see the Giants making a move. But other than that, man, I hope we stand pat, and I hope we end up with Malik Neighbors or Roma Dunze or praying for a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. But that's where my head's at right now, man. I want to get that number 1 wide receiver, and I want to continue to build this roster for the guy that eventually is more than likely going to replace Daniel Jones. But if it's me, I'm rolling with Jones and Locke going into next year and maybe a developmental quarterback early day 3. That's what I'm hoping the Giants do.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I wouldn't complain as much as I want a quarterback. I would not complain at all because, like we said at the top of the stream, you got to build this team correct and getting yourself a blue-collar player, whether that's Neighbors or Marvin Harrison or even Joe Alt. Giants fans should not complain. I know we want to.
I don't get that, man. I don't get why. Whenever I even bring up the prospects of taking a Joel, people want to rip your head off. I had somebody respond to one of my tweets. I think it was I forgot who it was, but it was a guy with a big following on Twitter. He's like, if Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll take Joe Alt, they should be fired. I'm like, what are you talking about, dude?
Why?
This guy's like a top 5 or 6. This guy's a top 5 or 6 prospect in this draft class. He plays one of the most important positions. Like, no, man. If he feels he's a cornerstone, I think people, like you said earlier, I think people are just too short-sighted when it comes to the draft. They're just thinking for 2024. It's not about 2024. It's about 2029, 2030. Like these are guys that you're projected to be, long-term pieces for this team. So no matter what they do, I'm just gonna have, you just have to hope as a fan that they get it right, and we'll see what happens in about a month.
Absolutely. And we'll be here to cover that as well. Appreciate every single one of you guys stopping by. It really means a lot. You guys can find everyone on the panels, channels, and Twitters in the links in the description box below. Appreciate you guys stopping by, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you so much, y'all.
Have a good night.